Good morning. I am here with the wonderful Ira, all the way in Finland. And I am so excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about emotional agency and dealing with all the difficult problems in the workplace. So tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I've been looking forward to this conversation since we had the first session last year, and it was just absolutely amazing.
Me too,
Um,
actually. I really have. It's been like on my mind and in my heart the whole time. I was like, oh, I've got to do another thing with Ira. It'll be great.
so thanks for the invite. Briefly on me. Well, I'm one of the owning partners at Emergy. I'm an executive trainer, executive coach, working mainly on helping people develop their emotional skills at workplaces, helping them thrive, be more well-being, and then reach the business targets more easily, in a
I
nutshell.
like that. I like that. That's really good. That's a really good brief way to explain the extremely complicated process that is your work. But it's complicated in a good way, right? It's complex is maybe the better way to say it. It's a complex solution that you provide. What are your words for that?
And yet it is really not, because the
And
whole
yet it's
point
not. That's true.
well, I give you a concrete example. So building emotional agency starts, of course, with yourself, to acknowledge what you're experiencing in different encounters, in yourself, in others, in different situations at work, and then using that information to fine tune your own behavior in a best possible way to have a good impact. But that's not enough, because that's all about individuals. But when we want to develop the organizational competence, for instance, we take a look at what's happening in a leader's, daily life as leadership encounters during 1 month. We collect those like a mind map, and then we integrate the stuff so that it actually is like a nicely forced routine that becomes a routine as you follow it. So it's actually very simple.
It is.
It requires persistence and systematic approach, but it's simple. It's nothing extra. It's like a lens. You take a different view on whatever is happening anyhow in the workplace.
I tell people the same thing about inclusion work is that,
Exactly.
yes, it's complex, but it's actually very simple
Yeah.
all at the same time. It's just all kind of encapsulated. So I want to talk about, but for anybody watching that doesn't know me, I work in people operations consulting, so the people side of HR, and I do a lot of work surrounding inclusion, especially when it comes to hiring. That's kind of my expertise. But I want to talk today about, we have a lot of crazy things happening right now in the workplace, right? And it's just super stressful for a lot of people. And so I want to kind of talk about how we would use emotional agency to help people, the workplace, through these difficult circumstances. So the first one that I want to address is layoffs. We're seeing a lot of mass layoffs, and that's a complicated, hurtful situation to have to deal with. Now, I am a person, I genuinely enjoy firing people, and that's people that have earned it. I want to be real clear. That's people that have earned it. That's a firing.
Yeah.
I genuinely enjoy it, have no problem with it. Layoffs hurt. They just are crushing. So how would one use emotional agency to help your your workplace cope with mass layoffs?
That's a very good question. And what I'm about to talk about is actually applicable to any hard stuff that you need to deal with. You need to have a hard conversation, whether it's just, feedback, or if it's a bigger thing like massive layoffs. First thing to remember is that every single person wants to be treated and valued as a human being, irrespective of the topic. And it's surprising to me how the whole complex, there's a lot of legislation and jurisdiction involved in layoffs. So of course the leaders and managers are afraid of, do I say something that I shouldn't? But remember that it is far more harder for the people receiving the news than yourself. So first of all, consider those people as human beings. They do not want to be treated as an ID in an HR system or a number on an Excel spreadsheet. They are human beings. So that's number one. And then the second part.
No, wait. I just want to hear that. What a novel concept, treating a human being like a human being. Exactly. This is one of those things that I feel like should be common sense, but it's just not. So please continue.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And oftentimes we're so focused on delivering the news, the saying the things we need to say to deliver the message, that all of our energy and effort is focused on the facts, the figures, the content of what we're saying, whereas the impact and what the people will be left out with is actually the experience. How were they treated in times of crisis, in times of turmoil, in times of receiving news of being laid off? So the second part is prepare. Again, common sense, right?
Should be.
Prepare on seeing the world from the eyes of the person receiving the message. And just another thing is, stop hoping for that hard conversation to be easy. Stop hoping.
Yeah, it's not gonna be.
Wishful thinking of one day it'll be, I will enjoy it. No, you won't. So
enjoy layoffs. I feel like there's something inherently wrong with you. Exactly. Like if you enjoy laying off good people who have been, that's not good. You don't want that conversation to be easy. That means something bad.
Exactly. But I still know a lot of leaders who say, "Oh, I wish this was easier." Well, it's not. That's a fact. So think of it as a rule of thumb. If it can make life easier for you, if you remember that, have empathy towards the person, and yet be firm and assertive with the facts. People want to know the facts. They want to know what is behind that decision. So be as precise and explain as clearly as you can, and share the information that you can share. And then after that,
give grace.
After that, listen. Because the person wants to share what they feel about it. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want you to understand what they are going through. And by listening, you are not any less firm towards the decision. The decision still applies.
Right.
But the person needs to feel that my viewpoint, which is oftentimes completely opposite to what you're explaining, is taken seriously. And by that, you can still deliver the message in a respectful way, that you show that you value the person, and yet, unfortunately, this is the decision.
This is the situation.
Made.
And I think, real quick, I want to say, I think a lot of leaders are afraid to show that they're sad about it.
Absolutely.
That they're hurting too. And I disagree with that. I think show them, let them know that this stinks, you hate it. Even if you back the business decision, which I've been in the position where I didn't back it, and I've been in the position where I did. And both ways, I still let them know that it stunk. And that I was there for them. And I let them have it. But one thing I want to hit on too is, yes, you need to be emotionally available. And leaders, this is part of your job. Get over it. This is it. Taking care of your people, even as they're exiting, is part of your job. So be ready for it. This is what you signed up for. But one thing that I think a lot of leaders miss, and this can actually cause more hurt, is that they're not clear. I've seen people do layoffs that I had no idea what they were saying to me. Or what they were saying, not to me, but to the other person. I had no idea what they were saying. They were just kind of rambling and all this. Start the conversation with clarity of what is happening.
Absolutely.
We are here today because, unfortunately, the company has had to make a decision to lay off part of its workforce, and you are part of that layoff, or something to that effect. Bam. There it is. Now they understand what's happening. Then go into the rest.
You're absolutely right. It has been researched that it matters less what the decision is than it, than the people having clarity on the decision and
Right.
having the possibility to understand what what the context is and what has been decided.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, and one of the main questions I get, and I want to get your take on this, that I've always seen in layoffs, whether it's me doing it, somebody else, is why was I part of this?
Mm.
Why wasn't I one of the ones selected to stay? It still hits very personally. I like to offer an explanation of that at the beginning with the, this is what's happening. Here's why your position. And I say position. Typically, I don't like to make it about the person, but this is why your position is being eliminated.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on handling it? Because there are different ways you could handle it. So what are your thoughts on how to handle that aspect of it?
Yes. And I think it's part of having the explanation, delivering as much of the information behind the decision that you can, because people want facts. They also want you to be emotionally available and for you to understand what they are going through on the emotional level. But to balance it out, they also need the facts. And yes, I'm fully in agreement with how you explained to
Oh,
deal with.
good. I've not messed it up then.
And
So,
and I mean, there's no right or wrong in a sense that, if I wish more leaders were less afraid of saying the words correctly or having it, perfect sentences, because it's not about the words, but it's how you meet the person, are you present? Because we have this innate ability to sense if the leader is being authentic or not. So again, very
show your
simple things, right?
emotions. Yeah, show your
Exactly.
emotions. And I think part of why a lot of people come off as cold is that they're trying to control their emotions in it.
Absolutely.
And that's the wrong decision. And I just mean wrong from, I understand it. I want to give grace to the fact that I do understand why you're trying to keep it together, especially when you have to do multiple layoffs at a time. Trust me, that stinks and it wears on you and it is horrible. And if you have to have these conversations all day long, it's hard.
It is.
It's really hard, which also leads me into one of the things that I see a lot of upheaval about is how mass layoffs are being done. And I want to be clear. So there's a difference between doing a mass layoff at one location or doing it across a national or even multinational company where there's maybe hundreds of people in the same department but spread out. These types of things where you're not physically together, where you can't physically come into a room and do it. This is the drawback to a remote workforce. And I've seen a lot of people just really tearing into these CEOs for how they handled this because they did it on Zoom or they did it on an email. Well, okay, I want to address this real quick because this rubs me really wrong when this happened. So number one, if you don't have the option of having everyone in the same room, you're going to have to do it virtually. That's just basic common sense. Now, there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And I've seen some of these CEOs do it really wrong. For instance, just locking somebody out of their stuff when it's not a firing, it's a layoff. That's a rude way to let them know. Now, I understand the safety aspect and the security aspect because some people do not handle their layoffs well. I understand needing to shut down their access as soon as they know. But you could do it while the conversation's happening. That shouldn't be how they find out. But let's talk about the mass Zoom option. That's that person's attempt to have you all in the same room. They're trying to tell you all at once, and you can't tell people one-on-one. Okay, let me tell you, that doesn't work because then the rumor mills start, right? And then people find out from someone else, and that's really jacked up. That's really jacked up. So that's an attempt to have you all in the same room. So I know it's frustrating. It's not ideal. And they should also, I want to say, be offering you one-on-ones after that.
Absolutely.
100% should be offering one-on-ones after that. They should be offering support after that. 100%. but let's give some grace to these folks because A, this is a whole new world of everybody being
Mhm.
remote, of so many people being remote like this. And B, understand that the mass Zoom layoff is an attempt to have you all in the same room and to give you
Mhm.
that grace and to give you that space. That's my take on it. And again, I've seen it done very wrongly as well, but I do want to give grace to that and help people understand that that's a good attempt. That's a try. So what are your thoughts on how to perfect that then? So when it's the
Yeah.
remote workforce and you can't have the person face to face, what are the best ways to handle that?
I I would combine it with something you said earlier, and we call it self-disclosure. To share something of your inner world, just as you were explaining right now, the intention behind this. Why are we having this on Zoom with everyone online? And and to also add, I mean, it's part of the preparation that you think, what are my thoughts on this? How am I experiencing this? I mean, as you said, there's nothing wrong with sharing that this is hard for you too. That you would rather have everyone in a single location than have this
Right.
face to face in real life. But as it is not possible, this is how we try to best accommodate that.
Right.
So talk it out, because a lot of the time we make the judgment call that people assume, I mean, they know what we think, but they don't.
I
So
don't.
talk it out. It
So true. I think
and
it's
I mean,
also maybe an attempt to to get through it as quickly as possible that
oh
leaders are
yeah,
not doing that. And no,
yeah,
that is the wrong approach. You need to take your time. That is the incorrect approach. Take your time and explain, like you said, explain to people, share with people. That's very, very, very important. I know it's awkward, folks. I know it hurts. I know all you want to do is get through it and never have to think about it again, which you will anyway. Let me help you out there. You're going to think about it. It's going to stick with you for a
yeah,
while. So just knit it, grit it, and bear it, and be there with your people. Sit in it with your people.
exactly. Because if you try to ignore the fact that it is hard for you too, it will haunt you longer. So, you are doing a favor for everyone to show more humanity in that
Yeah,
situation, because it's
yeah,
tough for everyone. And the
it
more
is.
you can be an authentic human being and share something of your inner world, because it does not decrease your credibility. It does not. Quite the opposite, actually. Because then they sense that you actually feel something. You're not Teflon.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not, yeah. So try it out.
Try being more human. What a
Hmm.
novel concept. And it really does. It will. If you want to do something to help your people, that's one of the biggest things that you can do.
Yeah.
Also, have the resources already prepared for them and sent to them in an organized fashion because what you say to them verbally is not going to sit. They're going to be reeling. So make sure that you email it to them, hand it to them if you can, and make sure that they have everything that they can possibly need.
Yeah.
Um, it is one of those things. It's a tough subject, and it does come up. And it's also interesting. So this is something I want to throw out too because I find this fascinating. So the big assumption when mass layoffs happen is that somebody didn't plan, that they didn't budget properly, this type of thing, and that can
Mm,
definitely be the problem. But a lot of people don't realize that this is also a strategic move.
mm,
A lot of companies intentionally hire workforce that they know they're only going to need for a few years for some sort of
mm,
growth spurt, and then they lay them off.
mhm,
In some countries, this is handled with contract labor more commonly. Here in the States, some companies, the better companies, in my opinion, handle it with contract labor. So it's a more honest transaction. But most will handle it with a standard employment agreement and just not let the people in on the secret that really and truly you're only temporary for the next few years and then we're going to let
mm.
you go. So it's also very strategic. Um, in those cases, what's your advice about? Well, first of all, I just feel like it stinks. I just want to throw that out there. I don't do that. But
Mhm,
if you're the one that's stuck having to do the layoff in this circumstance, it probably wasn't your choice to do
mhm.
all of this. what is your advice on how to handle the why this is happening? Because it's not
Let's
so much about an accident or a downturn in the economy or whatever. It's just this is just where we're at. So how would you handle that?
Oh, that's a tough one. A curveball you're throwing at me, especially that I have no clue of the US legislation. So let me,
I know. Well, legality is outside of it. Just what are
yeah.
the and they're pretty liberal on this aspect, by the way. So it's just more of how would you explain to people the why is this happening to you?
So first of all, I would make sure that we have an aligned message. Go if it, if it applies to different business units or such, that we are aligned. Again, preparing for that. And then the second part is it's regarding the fairness of that process. You know, you need to have the facts straight. I mean, in to the extent that you can. You need to have
Right.
clarity. You need to have explanations, just as in any case. And then you need to be able to listen and leave space for the people to comment, ask questions, even though you don't have the answers for everything. You need to have them feel that their viewpoints, their concerns, their rumors, they are taken seriously. And please do not say that, oh, I'm only delivering the message. This is company policy, can't do anything about it, because that's the worst thing you can do, to back it up, you know. And that's the easy, I know
It's a
I've
cop
been
out.
there too. Yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
I mean, if you go there unprepared, that might just happen. Even though now we're talking, oh my gosh, this is not how we're going to deal with it. But I know for myself that at some point that idea comes to my mind. Oh, it's the easy way to stop this, because it's a scary situation. People's emotions and the reactions are scary. So how are you going to remain in control? Again, that's part of the preparation. And do not use the company policy or I'm just a messenger
Right,
thing.
right. And you can say, now you can say, if somebody asks you a question you genuinely don't know, you can say, I was not part of the decision-making process, so I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that part of the question. That's okay. But
Exactly.
don't use the cop-out of this is just happening because company policy, the end. You need to have a little bit more available. And you're right.
Exactly.
So preparing with the idea of these are the questions that they're probably going to
Mhm.
have is very important. Very, very important. So I
And
want
also,
to go ahead.
I want to add to that. Also, before delivering the bad news, prepare the audience. For example, saying that what I am about to deliver to you might cause a lot of questions, concerns, doubts, fears, even. I'm happy to answer those after this meeting. So please hear me out.
Yes.
So you will then have more, the people will feel more in control, even in times of turmoil.
Yes, that is an excellent, excellent aspect. And that leads me into so layoffs are not just hard on the people who are let
Mm,
go, they're hard on the people who stay. And not just the
absolutely.
emotions of it and the fear of it, like, am I next? But also sometimes now they have more work to do and things actually
Mhm.
are going to, or their position just changes. And so there are still things for them to be considered. So after you take care of step one and step two and three and four that are all about the people that
Mhm.
are being actually let go. Now you need to talk to your humans that are left behind, and the
Mm,
same preparation is needed and the same amount of grace and letting people sit with their feelings.
exactly.
One thing I've always recommended is be prepared for the rest of the day to be non-working
Mhm.
and just let people express what they need, maybe leave and just get it all out. Um, what are some of your suggestions to
Mm.
help people process that are still left behind? And how do you then regroup and get
Yeah.
people motivated for work the next day?
Yeah. We have actually worked with a number of companies on that matter. So one thing is that to help them cope with whatever they are experiencing, and to talk about emotions. We use the map of emotions when, um, it sounds easy, but really when you name it, you partially tame it. And to share not just as an individual, but in a group of people who are remaining, because sharing is part of reconnecting. Sharing is part of the healing process in a way that, you might feel the sense of relief when you find out, oh, my colleagues are worried about the same thing. Oh, they have the feelings of guilt even. Why am I here? Why are the people laid off? So to talk about what's going on is the easiest way to actually get rid of that emotional burden that we
Right.
are carrying, and then to start shifting with time on how we're going to handle this. To build the sense of belonging, there needs to be a place for sharing. And remember, sharing is not the same as complaining, what many leaders or managers are afraid of we're opening the Pandora's
Not
box
the
by
same.
letting people talk about their emotions. Well, they will enter the workplace anyhow, or the Zoom or Teams, so better talk about it, right? And
Yeah, they're there anyway, so you might as well
exactly.
just address it and deal with it.
And the unaddressed negative emotions actually will have a huge negative impact on the productivity as well. So, from the business perspective, you better allow people to have constructive talk about how are we actually dealing and feeling about this stuff, because it will have an impact on their commitment, their sick leaves, their well-being, their,
Day-to-day
everything.
production, everything will be affected. It really is true. And creating the psychological safety for people to really be able to talk about it.
Yeah,
Part of that is, again, you showing your vulnerability too, which, trust me,
absolutely.
I that does not come naturally to me. I am talking as a person who had to really work at this, because things, and I think also things affect me differently than they do a lot of people. Part of that is due to my neurodiversities, so they hit me differently. So it was hard for me to learn that aspect of leadership and of the role, but it's an HR, but it is a huge part of what you're obligated, quite frankly, to do. This is what you signed up for, is the people work. So the next issue that I want to bring up that's very prevalent right now in the workplace is there is a lot of fear
Mm,
and pain from different political things that are happening, and not
mm,
just in the US.
yeah,
I mean, I've spoken a lot about things in the US, but there's
yeah,
things in other countries too. I'm very
yeah,
well
yeah,
aware of
yeah,
that. A lot of hurt. So, and people always say, no politics in the workplace. Okay, well, I want to say that, first of all, to some extent, yes, that's true.
yeah.
So, no politics in terms of, you should not be encouraging political
Mm,
discussions as much as possible. That's going to create animosity. That's just not really the right
mm-hmm.
aspect. But sometimes you do need to address politics in general. So, like, for instance, here in the States, when Roe v. Wade reversal happened, some companies came out and said, okay, if you need XYZ kind of healthcare, we're here for you, blah, blah, blah. So they didn't really talk politics, but they just said, hey, this is our response to this situation. So sometimes that's warranted, but also sometimes we need to acknowledge the trauma that some people are experiencing. And we're seeing mass levels yet again. Here we go again. We just, at least in the States, we just kind of got through one giant hill of the roller coaster.
Yeah,
Now it seems like we're back on it.
yeah.
We need to acknowledge the pain that people are feeling, that it is going to affect their work, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thing. So, what's your advice on how to cope with sort of a mass personal trauma that is happening in the workplace? And the same thing, like with mass shootings and things like that. All of
Mm-hmm.
these, how do you cope with that?
It's a moment of crisis, isn't it? So that's what I referred to in the beginning, that these are quite simple ways of handling, because the same approach that you would use to handle the discussions and allow for sharing and talk about the emotions, the true feelings for people who are remaining in the company as opposed to those who are laid off, the same applies to any crisis. Allow time to talk about it, to talk about what's going on, to address and allow people to talk. Have you read about the study after the 9/11? The companies they were researching in the area, the companies how they dealt with the crisis.
It's been a while. I actually did. I read. Well, I don't know if it's the same one you read, but I read. I read an article about some of that. But please share. Please go on.
So, just a short summary. Some of the companies thought that, oh, we need to get control, get back to their routines, and that will help us cope with whatever crisis or trauma we faced. So, in the short term, those companies actually did fairly well. But in the long run, those companies who didn't push or rush people to get back, on working on the work stuff and being productive and, following the processes and stuff like that and getting the business goals, but allowed them to share, to talk, to take time off. They call and ask, how are you doing? How are your families doing? Can we offer you some help? Well, for us, not surprisingly, but surprisingly to many, they were the ones who thrived from the business perspective. And think about the commitment they built, the sense of belonging, the psychological safety they built, not just talking about it, but doing it. And that's the thing with emotional agency. You need to do it. It's active. It's taking responsibility, contributing, and that's the same thing. I mean,
I like that, taking responsibility and contributing. That is the difference, right? Because people always talk about emotional intelligence, but if you don't do anything with that, then what good is it? It's all about the action behind it. And I want to say, I've seen the workplaces that have done it. And I think we read the same thing, by the way, because that sounds exactly like what I read. So I think we did read the same study. Yeah, I think we did read the same thing. But it's very fascinating to me that people kind of miss these very basic, human elements that we need to talk. We need to do these things. So I always tell people, create controlled situations. Say, okay, we're not going to do it just out in the middle of the workplace, but because that's chaos. But let's have this meeting and let's talk about it. Also, mental health resources for people who are just going to randomly throughout the day just be like, I can't deal with this anymore. Have a standby option, where people can call somebody, text therapy, where they can have maybe a mental health professional if it's something very severe, like a mass shooting, local to where you are. Have a mental health professional on site for a couple of days. Have them come in and just sit there and be ready for people that need to come in and talk. Hold group, that type of thing. I know it feels uncomfortable. It's new. It's a new concept in the workplace, but mental health is part of health. And when your people are, and that's why that word's in there, health. And so when I know it sounds silly, but it's true. You have to tell people. You have to tell people.
I know, but we're not a brain on a stick.
No, we're not just floating around, it's part of it. And so when you take care of your people, they are more productive and they are more creative, they're more innovative, and they're more and when you show this type of empathy and this type of commitment to them, it does get reciprocated. I have seen the places that do this, and these are the places where their people love them. And even if their people eventually move on, it's always a fond memory. They're always talking the place up. They refer people to that company. It's incredible. So there's also a business element to this. It's not just the feel goods. It's not just the integrity behind it, which this is part of integrity. It's also a good business practice, just plain and simple, taking care of your humans.
It's basically showing and answering the basic psychological needs. I see you and I appreciate you. That's it. I mean,
that's it.
And as
I can't tell you, I see people all the time leaving companies or being massively unhappy because they don't feel appreciated and they don't feel seen as a human being. It's such a simple problem to solve.
And back to what we have been discussing previously, to build fairness in tough times, leaders need to remember that when you fill in the tank of appreciation, you systematically make sure that whenever you appreciate someone, you make sure they know it. So when I'm talking about these appreciation tanks or batteries, when you charge that systematically, people who feel appreciated are more willing to accept those poor decisions or unpleasant news or critical feedback, when on the other side it balances it out, the feeling of appreciation. So
Yeah,
just, yeah, every time
it's
you
true.
appreciate someone, make sure that they know it, because they don't.
They don't. Again, we're not mind readers. I feel like we
Exactly.
need to like hashtag humans aren't mind readers. Like it's just
I love that.
just
Let me write down hashtag humans are
hashtag
not.
humans are not mind readers. It's just true. And people forget this all the time. We forget that with our partners, with our friends, with our family, with our workplace, with just society in general. We forget that people are not
Yeah.
mind readers. Which also, just a quick comment, as you're communicating, if somebody says something that hits you wrong, but you feel like overall this person is, an ally, an advocate on your side, someone who cares about you, takes it, instead of responding with hostility, or even if it's somebody that you don't really know, let's say even that, instead of responding with hostility because you're making assumptions about what they're trying to say, unless it's blatant, in other words, it cannot be argued. So from the standpoint of, it would be like saying the difference between somebody assuming something that somebody says is misogynistic versus somebody saying women are less than men. Okay, that's a blanket statement. You can't argue with that. But if it's something not as obvious as that, pause and say, can you tell me more about that? Or can you explain your line of thinking to me there?
The power of curiosity.
The power of curiosity. It really is what everything comes down to. I heard Seth Butler do a whole wonderful presentation about that a while back, and I was like, yes, that's the word. That's the word. And so now I say curiosity so much because that really is what it comes down to. Responding with curiosity and asking for clarification, because a lot of times we just have little miscommunications. This person thinks they're being clear. It's not received that way. So take the time, and that will also play into the emotional agency aspect as well, because sometimes what somebody says just hits us a little bit off. But I want to get into our last topic on how to use emotional agency, is that and this is actually a positive thing, but it can also still be scary in the workplace, believe it or not. And that's when there's a massive growth that happens at the workplace. Like, let's say an acquisition or something like that, and people are left going, well, how do I fit into this? Like, okay, yeah, this is kind of cool, but how in the world do I fit into this? How, again, I feel like we're back to just having the conversation and just kind of putting it out there. But what are some things that you might expect, from people? What are some fear points? And then how do you address those outside of the obvious, let's hold a conversation and talk about it?
So am I addressing this from the leader or manager point of view?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, to understand that even if the news are good, in an instant, our brain is hard-coded with negativity bias. So
true.
Even though the news are good, we go, oh my gosh, what's the threat to me? What happens to me? And that happens in an instant, and a lot of the time we're not aware of it. Whereas the leaders have been typically part of the process of negotiating and doing stuff in the background. So they are far ahead of the people.
Yes.
And oftentimes these leaders, they are hoping for people to be all joyful and enthusiastic about the good news. Well, guess what? They are not there yet. So what I'm talking about the leaders and trying to tell them that, calm down. Realistic hope is what's needed.
I like that, realistic hope.
Exactly. And not pep rally, hype does not work.
So glad that you said that. Oh, hold on. I got to say, I'm so glad that you said that, because so many companies do like this weird kind of almost pep rally type situation to announce these kinds of things. And I'm like, oh my God. And everybody there's just like, oh God, do I still have a job? Or what does this mean? Or what, so give grace and think about where they're at, right?
Exactly. Because people want to feel that they can relate to the leaders. They want to feel that they are in a trusted environment. And if there is a mismatch, the leader is all hyped up and people go, oh my gosh, it will turn against itself. They will probably just quietly quit or resign or just ignore what's happening and look elsewhere. So in order to build the sense of belonging and psychological safety, as you said, again, talk how you feel. Talk that you understand that this might cause a lot of questions, concerns, doubts, fears even, and that's okay.
Yes. And try to know something when you go into these talks, by the way. I've seen a lot of people try to have these talks when they don't know anything. Are we still going to have jobs? I don't know. Okay, well, that's just super helpful. Know something, and you should. I'm sorry, as you have a merger and acquisition, you should know something. Now, you can tell people, hey, we're working on this merger. We have full intent to keep the company intact, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But also just be realistic and understand. And I saw one manager, and he handled it just fantastically. He came in and said, so I'm here today to tell you how you're going to make more money, have more benefits, and we're going to have more products to offer. And everybody's like, woohoo! So then they were on his level. And then you could be excited about it. And then he explained about the merger and all that type of thing. And I thought that was genius. I was like, what a great way to go into this. Yeah, get them in. So he did it a little pep rally, but he did it well. He said, these are the ways it's going to benefit you. These are the things that we're here to talk about today. And there were a few things in there that were a little awkward and funky, but that was great. And so you have to give people the information, let them respond to it, and then go into the rest of it. Notice how we just keep talking about letting people respond to their emotions.
Yeah, and I want to ask you questions for that. Because as you know, we have been studying this a lot and the impact on having successful transformations or mergers and acquisitions or strategies, etc. And two fundamental questions make all the difference. You want to know what those are?
I do.
So whenever you have news for the people, whatever it is, if it's a small one or a big one, if it concerns a project or the whole organization or whatever, ask the people, instead of the Q&A, which is the awkward silence oftentimes, and then they start talking when the doors close or the Zoom ends, that this talking starts or the rumors start spreading around like you have no control over. Instead of that, ask them, what are you most afraid of? And what are you a bit curious about? Or what are you interested in? And ask them submit the feedback, because that will be such valuable information for you to then focus on your efforts on, the fears, the doubts, and then feed in the interest and curiosity.
Yes. And
again,
also
the power of curiosity.
Again, the power of curiosity, right? And also I want to hit on something else that you kind of hit on there, is it's not just going to be one conversation often, whether it's bad things or good things. It's going to be ongoing. And be ready for that. So just have a process already in place for people to talk about it, to give feedback, this, that, and the other. It really does make a difference. It does. How you respond to these things, folks. And as somebody who poaches people from companies all the time, who builds out HR function, who talks to the people, has a strong relationship with people who quit, stay, deal with problems, all this kind of stuff, I will tell you that what Ira is saying here is 100% on point. And the more that you connect to your people, and trust me, again, I'm not an emotional person. I completely get that it's awkward for some people. We've been taught not to do this. So we have to kind of unlearn some old taught behaviors. But when you do these things, it works, and your people connect. You have a better, healthier workplace. People stay with you longer. They are happier. And the other upside to that is not only does innovation increase, profits increase, all of these great things, but you have a much more loyal customer base, because that starts to roll in, and it really does make a difference. So as we close up here, as we wrap up this excellent conversation, and thank you again so very much for joining me today, Ira, tell people, please, how they can connect to you and learn more about emotional agency.
Thank you, Catherine. It was such a pleasure again. I would continue for hours and hours and hours.
I know.
I'm most active on LinkedIn. So just, I'm happy to connect with like-minded people who want to make work life better. Just in simple
that.
terms.
Yeah, just simple. Just do you want to be a better human in the workplace?
Yeah.
Thumbs
up. Hashtag humans are not mind readers.
That's right. Hashtag humans are not mind readers. That's what we took away from this conversation. And that emotions do belong in the workplace, which is shocking to a lot of us.
Yeah, well, they will come anyhow, whether you like it or not.
So might as well learn how to deal with it.
Absolutely. By the way, you nailed this by saying a lot of the time, learn how to deal with this, because these are not something that we're born with or not, but something that everyone can learn every single day.
I love that. And with that, I thank you again for joining me, Ira. Everybody connect with Ira. Follow Emergy. Fantastic company doing some really cool work. They've done some great studies. And everybody have a wonderful day. I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.